welcome to this breakfast session for Wired Sussex members. I'm Anna, Events and Marketing Coordinator here at Wired Sussex. I'd like to thank you all for coming and also thank our sponsors, Plus Accounting, who sponsored this series of sessions. Today we'll be joined by Rebecca Kimber, CEO of Create.net, who will be sharing how we can make our digital business even more sustainable. So let's get started. Over to you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Anna. So just quickly, I thought I'd start by just asking where people are on the journey, because I've kind of put together some notes, but they might be a bit basic, and it might be that we want to elevate the conversation. So I know Sam, I know Sam quite well from part of the Million Tree Pledge that we're in, and that's how I know you and what you're doing. So how about you, John and Jason, James, who just a really quick 1 minute about where you're at would really help me to know how to sort of chat about this. John, do you want to go first?
Yeah, in terms of making my business more sustainable. Well,
you could say you're nowhere and you're just looking at it.
I wouldn't say I'm nowhere. I think I'm, I don't sort of generate a lot of, well, I don't really do, product or anything like that. So I don't necessarily have any waste. So I'm kind of, at the mercy of, everything else, and where you get your power from, driving my car around, anything like that, really. Yeah, so it's I don't know, really. I don't want to. I'm aware. That's where I am.
Yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah.
It's a problem. Yeah. How about you, Jason?
I'm a big fan. We've had a sustainability policy since 2001, but and we've been members of business in the community, for about 15 years now. So we always had a sort of sustainable approach, and our focus has been about influencing our customers and stakeholders to be more sustainable in their activities. Been like the main way that we thought we could actually have an impact. But I've never gone as far as Sam, and congrats to you, Sam, and Propellernet for going the whole hog and becoming B Corp certified. I'm very interested to learn more.
James?
Yeah, so I work for Plus Accounting, so we don't have such a digital business, but I run the digital channels, so just sort of seeing what sort of tips we can get to make the sort of channel sustainable, really.
Brilliant. Jake, how about you? Your speaker.
Should know by now. Yeah, I think very similar, actually. We're kind of very aware, and the kind of clients that we work with tend to be within the sort of third sector and conservation as well. So I think with kind of working with them, we get kind of tips as we go, but also I think some of the larger organizations we work for, we're able to kind of pass on knowledge to them as well. So yeah, I just wanted to see where everyone else is at really today, and yeah, get some tips.
Cool. Thanks, Jake. Well, I'm Rebecca. I run a software business called Create.net, which is a platform to build your own e-commerce store and website. And we've been doing that for about 20 years. And we've always been reasonably sustainable. Like Jason, we were in the very original business in the community things that we were doing a long time ago. And we've been just incorporating it more and more into our business and our company strategy and our mission to be much more sustainable. And you've all kind of talked about slightly different definitions of sustainability, because actually at the moment it's being bandied around as a bit of a buzzword with no real defined idea about what it really means, and people are using it in different ways. So I'm going to focus more on our environmental angle today and how we can take that through in digital businesses, because as you mentioned, John, actually as digital businesses we're very beholden to all the services that we're using. And although I really want to make lots of change in our business in regards to the suppliers that we're using, lots of us are all interlinked to make things like net zero happen, because everybody needs to make all the changes, because we're all reliant on each other. If I'm using Xero for my accounting, I need them to be making the changes. If you're using me for your website, you need me to be making the changes, but I need everybody else to make changes too that I use in order to reach those kinds of goals and have that impact on the environment that we need to have. So I was just going to talk through some really straightforward things to start with. I'm going to need to close that screen. And you know, everything we do and everything we touch has an impact on the environment. And someone said this to me the other day in a meeting, and they were an agency and they're now pitching for things, and people are coming asking for sustainability policies and they're asking to do these things. And I think that we're going to start to see that it's going to start to become law for everybody that we all need to meet these targets and we all need to make these changes. So we, you know, in Brighton here, I think we've got a really good opportunity to get ahead of the curve and start thinking about all our emissions and the actions that we're taking as much as we can, because at some point there's going to be some kind of emissions tax, and there's going to be, you know, all sorts of things we need to be reporting on, like we do tax and VAT and stuff like that. And it's just good to start thinking about it now, because actually, even if we're not thinking about it from a legal perspective, we should be thinking about it from the environmental perspective, because the environment needs us to act, you know, immediately and as fast as we can. Sorry, I keep thinking I can move the presentation on, you know, on the screen with the video, but I can't. So, you know, what we've been doing and what I think there's a really big opportunity for is that we all start framing our business choices and our models around sustainability, and, you know, all kinds of different sustainability, like you mentioned, Jason, with thinking about our inputs into the communities, thinking about our environmental impacts, and, you know, just making sure that we are not harming the planet further in the actions that we're taking as businesses. So, you know, people are talking all about net zero, and that's kind of like the buzz stuff right now, but there's so many other problems that are going on in the planet, and everything's so closely linked that we need to think about all of these things. And that can be really overwhelming, because actually lots of it feels like it's really out of our control. And so we, you know, you need to start with a plan and think about which things we can impact and which things we can do. But really, we all need to actually be changing pretty much everything about what we're doing immediately. And that's quite difficult, because we're relying on everybody else to do the same things. But I really think that, you know, with all these things, there's a really big opportunity for us as businesses to lead the way and to make those changes and to push for change. And that's one of the things we've been doing, because we know that the internet's a really, really hungry place, energy-wise, and, you know, we're choosing our suppliers in ways that mean that we're voting with our money. And that's what we need to do in all the things that we're using. So starting with renewable energy providers, because I don't know how many of you are using renewable energy in your offices or encouraging your teams to be renewable. We're remote working, so we're trying to encourage our teams to move there. But it's tricky, because you might have people who are renting, you might be renting, you don't have control over your energy usage. But it's something like 15% of your carbon footprint is your energy usage when you're burning fossil fuels. And making that change can be a really big, you know, a really big cut in your emissions pretty quickly. And similarly to that, you know, thinking about if you've got company transport. So, you know, there's no point having an electric car if you power it off fossil fuels, because it's basically the same. So you need to think about where your energy source comes from all the time. And I was watching a program the other day, and he was talking about the fossil fuels and petrochemicals and plastic products. So there's now a lot of choices between plant-based products and petrochemical-based products, plastics. And so making those different choices means that we're reducing our fossil fuel usage. And that's one of the really big things, because actually the fossil fuel usage is the thing that's adding extra CO2 into the environment. Because if you think about it, CO2 in itself, it's all being bandied around, it's bad, 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 but we're breathing it out, and we need it for our life cycle. It's just that now there's more than the life cycle needs, because of all the fossil fuels we've been emitting from the ground coming up into the atmosphere. And that's probably the easiest way to think about it. If we stop burning fossil fuels, we stop emitting all this fossil fuel CO2 that's locked in the ground, that isn't part of our current cycle that we've evolved to. And if we bring it back down and we stop burning it and we stop releasing more of it, things are going to get better pretty quickly. You know, not perfect, because we've got loads of CO2 to draw back down, but better. So when you're a digital business, the main power we've got really is with our suppliers, because we're not actually, we're not oil producers, we're not making vehicles, we're not producing products. And so the big thing for us, where most of our emissions are going to be, is in our suppliers. So like I mentioned earlier, I'm beholden, my service can only be carbon neutral or net zero if all the other services that we need to use, and we do need to use them, are also doing the same things. So we made a really big spreadsheet of everybody that we use, and we keep adding to it, actually, because every now and then we'll find somebody else. We're like, oh, we haven't realised we use them. Everybody from what I'm using now with Canva, to Xero, to the payment gateways we're processing with, to the third parties we're recommending, and really getting a really good idea about everybody in our pipeline and everybody that we're supporting or talking about and engaging with, and then looking at each of those and what they're doing. So basically determining whether or not we should change them. And you can't change them all immediately. It's difficult to change some of your suppliers, and it will take time and it takes plans. But once you've decided that you're on that direction, as you add new suppliers, you'll be thinking about, does this one meet these standards? And it's the same as, big organizations where they've got anti-slavery policies or ethical policies or, pay policies. It's all those kinds of things, but it's building this in as well. Is this doing harm in the environment? What's the better option? Because there are better options, and they might be a little bit more money, but in the long term, they're going to be much, much better. So that's definitely a big one that you should be considering, because, and James mentioned social media, looking at social media platforms, some of them are greener than others. Considering what you're putting out on social media, if you're putting out a huge video to thousands of people, then you're going to be putting out something that lots of people are going to consume energy around. Someone said to me the other day, if you're making videos, could you make it as a podcast? Because actually the environmental footprint is lower. If you're putting it out to big audiences, it makes sense to consider the digital assets and how you can optimize them. So the other, I'll come to that a little bit more in a minute, but the thing that we're doing at the moment with our team is something called Ecology, which some people, it's kind of growing, getting a bit of traction going, and they describe it as Netflix for your carbon footprint, because it's an easy subscription. You pay a little bit every month, and they plant some trees, and they've calculated the carbon footprint of the team members, and you're offsetting them. And this has been really good for us because we've got a remote team. So I don't control the energy that they're using. I don't control the tools they're using. I don't control what they're eating, because see, I can't do that. But if you're supplying a canteen, you can think about food and things like that to reduce your footprint. But because we can't do that, because we're all working remotely, we're doing this instead. And this is still a good thing to do anyway, because we need to give back more than we're actually taking. We've got something like 240 trillion tons of CO2 up in the atmosphere we need to bring down. And that's going to take some doing. So anything we can all be doing to chip away at that, alongside changing the way that we're running our business, is good stuff. And you can see here, we've got a forest. I don't know how many of you are on thinking of using Ecology, but everybody gets a forest. You can see all your trees. It makes it quite tangible. It's a bit of gamification because it's a leaderboard. And if you do think about signing up, you can head to our forest later. It's a little plug. But I get 30 trees in our forest, which is a good thing as far as I'm concerned, for the environment that they'll give us. So I just briefly touched on this a minute ago. Cleaning your digital footprint. So this is one of the things that I'm very guilty of, and that I've been running a business since 1999, and my email box is reflective of that. And I've been gradually working through deleting things, and my computer as well. It's absolutely chock-a-block. All this stuff gets into Dropbox. There's a digital footprint there, even though I'm personally on renewable energy, because Dropbox aren't making the progress that they should be doing. Google Drive's not so bad, but still, it's good practice. Clean it all up, get rid of it all. If we don't need it, don't keep it. And similarly with old social profiles and old websites, all these things are taking up energy on the internet. They're all stored somewhere in a huge black box or millions of black boxes in massive farms, powered by lots and lots of energy and loads of water as well. So just clear up and make it company policy just not to keep things that you don't need. Anything stored in the cloud can be burning fossil fuels, and you don't want that. And again, as you can, choosing different providers and thinking about the providers that you're using. So, and optimizing your images on your website, thinking about your site, all your mailing lists. Are you sending loads of emails out to people that actually they don't want to get? Are you getting loads of emails you don't want to get? Unsubscribe. It's all about just cleaning all that up, because it's all got footprint. And we don't think about the web being particularly tangible, but it's burning loads and loads of CO2 and other emissions, and it's growing. And that's a big thing that we as digital businesses, I think, can do, because that's probably where a lot of our footprint sits. It's probably smaller, but it's still footprint, and we should still look at getting rid of it. Finally, about your money. So, there's all this stuff on the news about HSBC where people are going and breaking their glass and talking about what they're doing and how they're investing in fossil fuels. And, our money is the thing where we have quite a lot of power as individuals and as small businesses. And, there's banks now that you can be using that are ethical. There's things to consider like your pension schemes, and making sure that you're not investing in fossil fuels through those things. There's a few links there, and I'll send this round afterwards. Or Anna will actually, I said to her. But you can go and look up what your bank is doing, what your pension scheme's doing. Triodos and the Co-op are quite good ones. I think there's Starling as well. And just start to pay attention to, it's all about just thinking about it, just paying attention to what you're currently doing, and what you're using and what you're supporting, even inadvertently. And I just thought I'll wrap up with this quote from Greta Thunberg, because I think she puts it really well. Instead of speculating about how the future may be, you should try to change that future while you still can, in order for that future to turn out the way it should. And we're at a point where we are a generation who can go either way. It's us. It's not the next generation. It's not the people after 2050. It's us. And we have to start to change things, change what we're doing. Because at the rate that we're currently putting CO2 into the atmosphere, I think it's 300 trillion tons, billion tons it is. Billion and trillion are quite different numbers. We've got 240 trillion tons up there. We're going to add another 300 billion tons, and that's in the next 7 years. And they consider that to be the tipping point. So everybody needs to start removing. I didn't want to make this into, doom and gloom, because there's enough of that goes around. And actually, we can be positive about it, and we can make the changes that matter. So the main thing for me is to talk about taking action, because any action is better than no action. And, we get told, measure it first. That's the first step. Well, most people are going to stumble at that first step, because it's too difficult to measure your emissions. It's too difficult to measure the damage that you're doing. Do the stuff I've just talked about, then start to chip away at absolutely everything else. And as you reduce your carbon footprint by getting these stuff first, then you can start to look at what's left, what's really hard, what's difficult for me to deal with. Are people that can support me making way in this area, rather than measuring first and getting stuck. We don't have 5 years to spend measuring, so we just need to get on and make changes that we can, because there are lots of changes that we can make. So I don't know how I'm doing for time, 20 minutes. I thought I would, kind of leave that up there as a sort of question, what's the first step or the single change that you can make in the next week or so, and just think about that. And if there's anything that we do, just take away that there's something in your mind that you're going to go away and change. That would be good for me off the back of the talk, because one of the things that I hear about is there's lots of things governments need to do, and governments need to be behind it, and they do, but we all have individual power. We have individual power in our money. That's where our power is, to pick and choose the right things. Anyway, that's probably it. Anybody got any questions? I haven't covered everything. You want to know the difference between net zero and carbon neutral? Because that's. Does anybody have any questions? Is that helpful? Yeah. Maybe.
Rebecca, that was really helpful. Thanks a lot for taking us through that. I think part of the big challenge is actually for everyone to be doing exactly what you're doing and spreading the word and showing people that this should be normal for us.
Yeah, exactly. It should be we just do this stuff, you know, and we put it through the same because it needs to be. James, are you saying something? No. I was just going to say, it might be helpful to just know a little bit more about what we're doing, you know, with raising awareness. I think it's something that everybody needs to be talking about. I know that what we do has a carbon footprint, and actually we're creating things which give other people carbon footprints indirectly because people have got websites. And so we're looking at every way that our product can be more efficient. How can we make it that our customers don't need to technically understand what their website needs to do? How can we optimize it better? How can we deliver it in a way that's less damaging to the environment? And those are the kinds of things that we all need to think about with the things that we're delivering, because we can't, you know, we can't all do nothing. That would probably be the ideal situation, is we all sit back, we don't consume anything, we don't do anything at all, and gradually things will improve. But that's not the way that life is. So, and that's not how everybody's going to be. So we have to start to be responsible and provide solutions to consumers, to people, that give people the options to not do harm. And that's kind of where we're at. And that is our, you know, that's the framing for our business choices. And that's what all businesses have a responsibility, in my opinion, to be doing, because, you know, we want to be, as Marcus, who's in the Million Tree Pledge with Sam and I, you know, we want to be good ancestors, and we want to think about what we're doing and how that's going to impact the future generations, because we don't really want to leave the planet in the worst place than we joined it.
Thank you, Rebecca. Is there any more questions?
Yeah, well, yeah, just to say thank you again. But also, yeah, is there a destination, an online resource that you think is worth looking at for kind of deeper information on this, or are we lacking in kind of resource?
It's a bit spread about at the moment. There's a couple of things. There's oh, Sam, help me out. What's
Small 99 would be starting place.
Mind blank then.
Yeah, there's a guy called Adam Bastock who has created he hasn't quite got a toolkit published, but if you just Google Small 99, just the number 99, his focus is on helping small businesses to make big changes. And he's a bit like Rebecca. He's kind of got a list of like what the top things you can do, and then it goes a little bit deeper into that. So I definitely recommend looking at that. And really, just to kind of back up a lot of what Rebecca's been saying, I read an article about 6 months ago which talked about digital services and digital content consumption, which I think everyone on this call in one way or another is part of that kind of that carbon emissions number, and it's actually surpassed the aviation sector now in terms of like percentage of contribution to carbon emissions, which is pretty stark when you think, if you ask a lot of people what's the worst polluting sector, I think flying would probably be what most people would put in the top three. Well, digital consumption and digital services are now worse than that, and the issue we face is that it's growing exponentially as, you know, everyone is consuming more and more and more content. And the answer on paper is, well, then why don't we just power data centers and you know, the cloud with renewable energy, which is a really suitable answer, because if that was 100% renewable energy, then we'd manage to clean it up. But the pace of growth for digital consumption is so fast and so much quicker than how much renewable energy is coming online, that we don't stand a chance if we just take that attitude that eventually, you know, all of it will be powered by renewable energy. There's a lot of kind of models that say that will never happen. So what we're trying to do behind the scenes a bit is put a bit of pressure on some like Amazon Web Services and Google and to build their own renewable energy plants so that they're not just taking all the renewable energy off the grid to try and make themselves look better. And because ultimately that's going to take away renewable energy from domestic provision or, you know, charging electric vehicles. So we've got this really quite complex challenge. And I think there is no getting away from the fact that actually we just need to make leaner emission content. And so, John, I'm really interested. You know, your world is all about video content, which is probably one of the most demanding on energy. But there's a brilliant company called Whole Grain Digital who are worth looking up. They've been pioneers in kind of greening the web, and they clean up people's code to make it less heavy on everything from websites to delivery platforms to software. So that they might be a good company to also just have a quick look at it. They've written a book called Green Web Development, I think it's called, and that's quite a good read if you're particularly interested in that. But yeah, it's a really complex challenge for us all, I think, because we're all going to have to compromise a bit and probably spend a bit of extra cash. But as Rebecca said right up front, I think the companies that really get on the front foot with this are going to ultimately be the long-term winners. The government have just announced a month ago that they will no longer take on, you can't win a government contract now without a really credible science-based net zero plan. So, you know, if the government have already done that, you can be pretty sure that large corporations are very close to that way of thinking too. So, you know, for our own business benefit, if we're working with bigger companies, we're part of their carbon emissions. So we've really got to, you know, put Brighton and our local businesses, you know, it would be great if we had a cluster that was over-indexing in climate action. So I just think we'll deliver, you know, more contracts into the city, and because this anyone that's not doing it is going to get turned away.
Yeah, agree, definitely. We need to think about what we're putting out there and what we're consuming, and, you know, just lead the way in technological advance to, you know, to think about minimal web design and think about less data being transferred, because there's so many points across the internet, you know, that data has to travel, that, you know, the footprint isn't just with you, it's all across through lots and lots of buildings. The one thing I would just mention is there's something called the UK SME Climate Hub, and the commitment that is backed by the government, and is also then part of the United Nations Race to Zero campaign. It's the recognised UK standard, which we're signed up to, and I'm pretty sure Sam signed up to as well. And that means that you're committed to net zero by 2050, I think it is, and halving your emissions by 2030. And there's quite a lot of information on there. I think they're sort of just getting going with it. And I think there's going to be a lot more kind of coming out after COP26 in November, the environmental meeting of all the different leaders from the world coming together in the UK. And I think there will be a lot more guidance. Things like net zero aren't really classified yet at that point.
There's a wealth of resources on the SME Climate Hub. It's been put together by Oxford University. But it's quite hard to navigate and a little bit overwhelming. So do check it out. But I'd recommend Small 99 definitely as a much lighter touch version. And also, don't spend too long planning what you're going to do. Just start doing the stuff that Rebecca's already talked about. Because no matter how many tools you look at, how much you try to kind of analyze your own business, there's actually, you know, 4 or 5 really key things that need doing. And I think renewable energy and financial services are definitely the two that probably the first things to look at, particularly as a business in the service sector like us.
Yeah, it might be a good point to wrap up if we don't have any more questions. So thank you all so much for joining and your questions today. A big thank you to Rebecca for joining as well. And thank you to Plus Accounting for sponsoring these sessions.